knew as soon as I was cast how important this would be. And I remember before I started, anxiety ridden. I talked to my mom. I was like, what if it's bad?
Yeah.
What if Moana's wearing like a grass skirt and coconuts? Like, what if it's like, I remember being so fearful that that we weren't making a film in 2016 and that people hadn't read The Room. I was so deeply afraid. But it turned out that first of all, our directors, Ron Clements and John Musker, had been working on this and researching and traveling to Samoa, Tonga, Aotearoa, Tahiti to learn from these civilizations, to then think of, well, what if we set it even further back? Like if Samoa, this is based in truth, Samoa is about as far back as we can trace Polynesian ancestors, unless you're going all the way back, in which we can trace our genomes, I believe, to Taiwan, which is very interesting. But the idea of having this story was like already 6 years into the making. So I stepped on when Moana was fully rendered, and they had a very good idea of what the story was and the flora and the fauna. They had an idea of the tapa or the kapa, the clothing, things like that, like what it was made out of, how they were going to animate it. So thankfully they did a great job. And I just got to come in and play. And my mom was in the recording booth all the time. And while it was freeing, I think it's also very scary, because if we get into like kind of how recording goes, you're alone in the booth. Like you'll usually have your directors on the other side, and then you'll have maybe a writer in the booth with you explaining the lines, feeding you some. I was definitely fed when I was like 16 to like, there's this line and then there's that line, like kind of a back and forth. But then you just wait in silence while you see other people on the other side of the glass talking.
Oh, interesting.
Was it the other actors? I'm so ignorant about what it takes to record in a vocal booth, but like who was acting on the other sides of the glass?
Yes. Forgive me. So there are no other actors. We record everything separately. So it would be me in the booth, and then a writer in the booth with me. On the other side of the glass, the door is closed on my side. On the other side of the soundproof glass, we had two directors, we had producer, we have the sound technicians, we have assistants, like all these people. We have someone taking notes, like all those people are on the other side, and I can't hear any of them. So I think that process also forced me to make the biggest choice possible, and then trust that someone was going to rein me in.
Sure.
And if they didn't, I had to take that as like a pat on the back, which for us as actors also, like, I think the thing that hurts the most is not the no's, it's simply the silence. Like not hearing anything back is actually how you know that it's not moving forward. So that silence and just trusting that something else would come up or we'd move on, like that silence was actually really important for me. As I am someone, I don't know if you can tell, I like to fill the silence. I'm a big talker, so yeah, all these things.
Obviously, Moana exists in sort of the great tradition of like Disney leads and sidekicks, and Moana and Maui are like one of the greatest. I'm curious, like, what was it like meeting Dwayne Johnson? When did it happen in the process? You weren't apparently reading lines together.
Yeah.
What was it like to go on a press tour with him when you were 16? Like, just what was that whole relationship?
So there were no recordings with him, but we did a fake recording, which was for press. And that was when I met him in Florida after we had fully wrapped the film. And he was absolutely lovely. He brought me flowers. He smelled really good. My mom has been such a fan of him. She got to joke in person in front of him that she would like to go rock climbing, which is an insane thing to say, by the way.
Yeah, I love that.
He was lovely. And that's kind of how I remember my first meeting is that particular phrase that my mom said.
You know, the more I think about it, the more clever it is.